In the midst of the European campaign, a single soldier found himself separated from his unit, surrounded by enemy forces, and seemingly at the mercy of circumstance. There was no grand entrance, no extraordinary preparation, only the quiet reality of war. One man, fatigued from weeks of operations, carrying the weight of both survival and duty. Captured by German soldiers during a patrol in 1944, his situation could have seemed hopeless to anyone observing from the outside. Yet, even in the brief moments of capture, subtle details hinted at an unusual capacity and awareness and calm born of countless small decisions under pressure. The morning had been ordinary, filled with the routine sounds of marching boots and distant artillery. His unit had been tasked with a forward reconnaissance, a careful advance through partially cleared territory. When enemy observation posts caught sight of them, movement was detected, and within moments, a squad of German soldiers approached. The soldier made no sudden movements. There was no panic. He submitted to temporary detention with an outward compliance that concealed an inner calculation. For those who would later analyze his actions, this moment would be noted as more than mere obedience. It was the quiet precision of a mind trained to survive, even while appearing constrained. The subtle hook of the chapter lies here. For a trained soldier, capture was not necessarily an endpoint. It was a condition to be assessed, understood, and ultimately, if possible, reversed through action. Even in the smallest details, hand placement, posture, eye contact information was being gathered, both by him and by his captors. War, in this sense, is not only a contest of firepower, but a dialogue between observation, prediction, and disciplined response. Historical context underscores the difficulty of the moment. By 1944, the Germans had fortified their positions with experienced infantry, were trained in managing prisoners and extracting intelligence. Yet the soldiers' environment was both structured and dynamic. Captors moved predictably in some ways, following procedure, but in others, they were influenced by uncertainty, haste, or misjudgment. The interplay of these human factors created an opportunity, a narrow space in which discipline and quick comprehension could shape outcomes before any physical confrontation began. Inside the prisoner's mind, there was no dramatization. Decisions were made quietly, almost imperceptibly. Observations about the terrain, the readiness of the guards, the position of nearby equipment, and the alignment of weapons formed a mental map. Every second, every movement, every slight hesitation was noted, not as narrative tension, but as a practical calculation. This accumulation of small assessments would later allow him to act decisively in a moment measured in seconds, not minutes, to overturn what seemed like total disadvantage. Emotionally, the chapter invites the audience into a space of calm observation. There is curiosity, yes, but not suspense manufactured by narration. The story does not tease violence. It focuses on human awareness and the subtle gathering of intelligence through perception. The listener begins to appreciate that the extraordinary often emerges quietly from disciplined attention rather than spectacle. The soldier's training, reinforced through months of frontline experience, had conditioned him for such moments. Combat often presented scenarios in which conventional tactics were insufficient, and survival depended on improvisation within established parameters. In this instance, his actions, seemingly compliant, yet internally strategic, exemplified the disciplined flexibility that allowed soldiers to navigate moments when conventional advantages were absent. On the historical stage, this incident illustrates broader truths of 1944. The front lines were fluid, and encounters of this nature, involving small units isolated from larger formations, occurred frequently. Many soldiers would be captured and either interned or transported, and their outcomes varied according to preparation, situational awareness, and decisiveness. In this context, the soldier's ability to remain composed under scrutiny is both humanizing and remarkable, providing insight into the kinds of skills and mental frameworks that influence survival beyond raw combat ability. It is in these precise, measured moments that what might later appear as heroic action begins to take shape. By the time his opportunity arose, the soldier had observed the captor's routines, noted their momentary lapses, and internalized the layout of the environment. Each movement was now anticipatory, each glance a calculation. The subsequent action rapid, effective, and almost surgical in its execution would not be sudden, but the inevitable result of preparation and observation. While the narrative emphasizes calm, in the quiet moments following capture, the soldier's attention shifted from the immediate threat to the subtle behaviors of those holding him. Each gesture, glance, and motion was recorded in the mind with precision. Captors, though trained and disciplined, were human. They exhibited patterns of action shaped by fatigue, routine, and expectation. Observing these patterns, the soldier began to understand the environment not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as a system with predictable elements. The process of assessment was methodical. He noted the number of soldiers assigned to guard him, their relative positions, the manner in which they handled weapons, and the gaps in their situational awareness. Movements that seemed automatic or unconscious, such as the slight hesitation when checking the surrounding terrain or the routine exchange of commands, were catalogued mentally. These small human behaviors created openings that would later prove critical. Emotionally, the chapter maintains a calm, reflective tone. The audience is guided to understand that the soldier's eventual success did not arise from impulsive heroics, but from careful observation and quiet calculation. There is no rush, no dramatization, only the accumulation of understanding. This allows the audience to appreciate the mechanics of human behavior under stress, and how disciplined attention can transform a disadvantageous situation into a moment of opportunity. Historical context emphasizes the significance of these observations. By 1944, German infantry and auxiliary units were experienced in managing prisoners, but even they were subject to the limits of fatigue, stress, and incomplete information. In small engagements, these human factors created variability. Captors followed procedures but did so imperfectly, often unaware that a prisoner might be watching as closely as they were themselves being observed. The soldiers' training had emphasized situational awareness and adaptability. On the battlefield, these skills were crucial not only for survival in direct combat, but also for understanding patterns of behavior in others. Captivity, in this sense, was not merely a pause in action, it was an extension of the operational environment. Each observation contributed to a mental map of risk and opportunity, allowing for strategic anticipation rather than reaction. One of the critical aspects of this assessment was timing. The soldier recognized that patience could be as powerful as action. By waiting for the captors to exhibit predictable sequences, shifting positions, exchanging verbal commands, checking the terrain, he was gathering essential data. This quiet patience, informed by experience under fire, allowed him to internalize patterns that would make decisive action both possible and effective. From the German perspective, the interactions were routine. Guards assumed control and expected compliance. Their behavior reflected training and doctrine. Contain the prisoner, maintain vigilance, and follow the prescribed procedures for escorting and observation. Yet, even within these routines, there were subtle inconsistencies. A soldier who paused slightly before issuing an order, a momentary lapse in the orientation of a rifle. By now, the soldier had fully mapped the behaviors of his captors. Every subtle hesitation, every pattern of movement, and every predictable routine had been absorbed. What began as quiet, methodical observation now became preparation for decisive action. The transformation from passive awareness to active engagement is not sudden, dramatic, or theatrical. It is the natural, inevitable outcome of careful attention and disciplined experience. Inside the small courtyard where the prisoner was held, the guards moved as they always had. Their positions followed established patterns, one soldier near the entrance, another pacing, a third stationed by the edge of the building. The intervals of communication, the moments of distraction as attention shifted between tasks, and the predictable rotation of guards all provided information that had been gathered over hours. The soldier's mental map was now complete. Each gesture and position offered a measure of predictability. Emotionally, the audience is guided to witness not tension created by narration, but the calm accumulation of preparation. The soldier's mind is active, focused, and precise. There is no heroism declared in advance. Instead, the audience observes a person applying knowledge in real time, translating insight into opportunity. The sense of inevitability builds quietly, not through loud dramatization, but through the natural logic of cause and effect. The historical context is equally important. In 1944, engagements involving small groups of soldiers and isolated prisoners were frequent along the European front. Training emphasized discipline, but human error remained a constant factor. Guards, operating under routine and sometimes fatigue, were vulnerable in subtle ways. The disciplined observation by the prisoner exploited these small vulnerabilities, not recklessly, But with the precision and patience honed by combat experience, timing was critical. The soldier waited for a precise alignment of factors, a moment, when attention was divided, when a shift in patrol left a small gap, and when the positions of weapons were favorable. The action itself would last only seconds, yet it relied entirely on the foundation of prior observation. Each calculated decision was supported by knowledge of human behavior and environment, turning what could have been a desperate gamble into a measured, reliable response. From the German perspective, there was no forewarning. Their training did not account for an adversary acting within the confines of captivity in this particular way. Their predictable routines, which had seemed sufficient to maintain control, now provided the framework for their own undoing. Historical patterns show that such moments were rare, but when they occurred, they demonstrated the profound effect of disciplined, human-centered decision-making in situations that were nominally constrained. The soldier's action was not fueled by impulsive bravery or chance. Each movement seizing a weapon, targeting effectively, and neutralizing multiple enemies was an extension of prior observation. This deliberate, step-by-step engagement exemplifies the principle that in war, insight and preparation can shape outcomes as significantly as force. Human cognition, trained and disciplined, operates as a tool with immediate, tangible effect. Emotionally, the audience experiences a quiet engagement. The chapter emphasizes comprehension and inevitability rather than suspense. Listeners are encouraged to understand how extraordinary results arise from ordinary elements. Observation. The seconds of decisive action had passed, yet the consequences extended far beyond the immediate moment. The soldier now controlled the environment, but the broader system, the German forces, their training, and their operational expectations was already beginning to respond. This chapter does not dramatize confrontation. It examines the natural evolution of events after a critical intervention, and the human, tactical, and operational consequences that followed immediately. The captors' routines were disrupted. Soldiers who had relied on predictable patterns now faced unpredictability, and their reactions were measured, procedural, and constrained by training. The disruption was not chaotic, but deliberate. Units recalibrated, reports were made, units shifted, and communication adjusted. The environment that had previously been stable became fluid. The soldiers' actions, precise and disciplined, had imposed a new condition on the system, one that could not be ignored. Emotionally, the audience is guided to understand inevitability rather than suspense. The focus is on the consequences of prior observation and disciplined execution, not on sensational drama. The aftermath is analyzed through human behavior. How experienced soldiers respond to unexpected events, how command structures adapt, and how small, deliberate actions ripple through a broader operational system. The narrative remains calm and reflective, keeping the audience engaged without generating artificial tension. Historically, the European battlefield of 1944 illustrates these dynamics. Infantry and auxiliary units were trained to contain prisoners, maintain vigilance, and follow routine procedures. Yet, when faced with unanticipated, high-impact behavior from a single soldier, these systems carefully constructed as they were showed the limits of adaptability. The momentary success of the soldier was a function of both his disciplined approach and the constraints inherent in human-managed systems of control. The immediate human consequences were evident. Soldiers who survived the encounter noted the efficiency and effectiveness of the action, mentally cataloging what had occurred. These observations would inform subsequent engagements, influence training adjustments, and shape operational thinking within the unit. In this sense, the soldier's influence extended beyond the physical moment to affect perception, planning, and future behavior. From the perspective of the German forces, the incident demanded adaptation. Units that previously relied on routine procedures were now required to incorporate contingency responses. Patrols were adjusted, attention to detail heightened, and coordination between soldiers intensified. This was not reactive in a sensational sense. It was procedural, systematic, and inevitable. Experience was being applied to correct for the disruption introduced by an unexpected, disciplined actor within their midst. The soldier, meanwhile, moved with the calm that had characterized all preceding stages. There was no exhilaration, no overt display of triumph. The action itself was complete, and focus shifted immediately to situational awareness, securing space, and anticipating the next set of consequences. His discipline remained consistent. With the immediate confrontation behind him, the soldier faced the aftermath, not as a moment of celebration, but as an occasion for understanding and reflection. The sequence of actions, the observation, the patient assessment, and the decisive engagement had concluded, and what remained was the quiet legacy of disciplined human behavior. In this chapter, the narrative shifts from action to consequence, examining how individual initiative resonates within a larger historical and human context. The European battlefield of 1944 was a place defined by constant motion, adaptation, and the accumulation of small, consequential acts. Soldiers on all sides experienced moments in which preparation, observation, and decisiveness shaped outcomes far beyond their immediate environment. In this instance, the soldier's disciplined execution had immediate tactical effect, but its significance extended further, influencing both the perceptions of the enemy and the understanding of his own unit. This is the essence of legacy in war. Influence that persists not only in physical results but in lessons drawn from action. Emotionally, the chapter emphasizes reflection rather than spectacle. The soldier does not revel in success, nor does he dramatize danger. The audience is invited to observe the natural consequences of disciplined decision-making and the subtle ways in which human behavior informs history. There is a quiet dignity in understanding that the extraordinary emerges from ordinary skill applied consistently and thoughtfully, historically. The aftermath of engagements like this one illustrates the broader interplay between human behavior and military systems. Enemy forces adjusted routines, shared intelligence, and recalibrated expectations. Soldiers who witnessed the event internalized lessons about discipline, observation, and rapid response. Within his own unit, the soldier's actions would be recounted with a focus on method and effectiveness rather than heroism, reinforcing operational principles for others who face similar circumstances. The chapter also reflects on the nature of advantage in war. Moments of control are always temporary, shaped by the dynamic interplay of observation and adaptation. What provided protection and opportunity for one brief interval becomes data for the system to respond to. The soldier's experience demonstrates that skill and awareness are effective, but only as part of an ongoing dialogue between individuals and the systems in which they operate. This understanding is central to the WWII style. Historical insight emerges from observation of human behavior, not from sensationalized storytelling. From a human perspective, the soldier's experience is instructive. The calm patience that allowed him to assess captors, anticipate movement, and execute action highlights the importance of preparation and composure under extreme conditions. Each small decision,